Act 2. Millicent looks in disbelief as she realizes the eye of the whirlpool is an actual eye. Its size is greater than that of the ship itself. It is surrounded by slimy tentacles which are covered in dead sea creatures, and Millicent swears she can see at least a couple mangled human corpses. The tentacles have sharp, spiked ends which stab towards the sky. The pupil of the eye splits in half to reveal many teeth, each one being at least the size of Edmund Tremble. The beast screams and rancid ooze flies into the air, dripping a shower of sticky, sickly stuff all over the deck. Millicent puts her hands over her ears to protect herself from the noise. Tremble clutches at his chest and steps backwards. "What's that god-awful noise?" says Captain William Jackson as he steps on the deck, looking dishevelled like he's been woken from an uncomfortable sleep. The crewmen on deck stand still and appear frightened, except for Hafthor Magnusson, an Icelandic giant of a man who steps to the port rail and looks at the huge monster, exclaiming, "'Tis a beast from the depths of Niflheim, Captain." Millicent looks back at the monster and sees that the whirlpool has grown massively. It has now engulfed the ship. The ship should be moving, aggressively circling the whirlpool, but it feels like it's barely moving at all. Millicent peers over the edge of the ship and sees that tentacles from the monster are lifting the ship in the air. Hafthor yells, "We're being lifted out the ocean by the beast." "Men, grab anything you can use as a weapon and fight your way out," responds Captain Jackson. The crewmen grab rope, buckets, wood, metal, anything they can find. They hurry over to the port rail. One by one they throw their makeshift weapons overboard, trying to injure the beast. Bloody injuries appear on the sclera and the eye looks angrily at the ship. It opens its mouth wide and wails in pain. Millicent grabs Tremble and tries to pull him away from the action. "Heart attack," says Tremble. Millicent is knocked down as a tentacle grabs a hold of Tremble and pulls him overboard. The tentacles continue their assault on the crew. More and more men are grabbed and pulled, screaming into the Atlantic Ocean. Millicent screams as the tentacle comes towards her face, but she is pushed out of the way by Coxswain Bennett. "It's not a good night to be a deck miss," says Bennett, rubbing the pain in his head with one hand while holding onto Millicent's arm with the other. Hafthor swings a plank of wood at a tentacle, but the tentacle grabs it and breaks it. He finds a huge rusty chain and he wraps it around the tentacle. He squeezes with all his might and its end snaps off, turning into a hose of rank malodorous blood. Another tentacle moves in with a stabbing action towards Hafthor, but he avoids it. The two crewmen behind aren't so lucky. They are impaled and lifted high in the air. The monster screams again in anger and drops the ship back down into the water. The whirlpool spins the ship violently and the remaining crewmen fall onto their asses. Millicent's fall is broken by Bennett's rugged body. As everyone looks up, they see what appears to be 100 angry tentacles rising high into the sky. A shower of shipmates' blood and monsters' ooze rains upon the deck, and then the tentacles crash down, tearing the ship into pieces. Millicent falls into the water and feels the coldness of it deep in her bones. She falls deeper and deeper into the water, with broken ship parts bashing her as she goes. She uses all her strength to swim, but the weight of her dress pulls her back down. She rips half of her dress off and continues a desperate swim. The power of the whirlpool eases off enough for her to manage to swim close to the surface, but not close enough. Moments before she passes out, she feels a rough hand grab her and pull her upwards. Then she sees only darkness. The darkness lingers. It feels pleasant, and all feelings of pain are gone. But it doesn't last. The harsh pain and the cold of the wild Atlantic Ocean return. She feels a hairy face pressed up against hers, giving her mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Millicent spits a fair amount of salty seawater out of her lungs and onto her shoulder. Her eyes open, and she sees Bennett looking down at her. Millicent smiles a weak smile as she looks at her saviour. She tries to speak, but only manages to whisper, "Thank you for saving me." Bennett only grunts in acknowledgement, then looks off. Millicent sits up to see that they are floating on a cargo container. It bobs up and down in the water, but seems fairly sturdy. The two watch as the remains of the ship sink into the whirlpool. Millicent swears she can see Captain Jackson standing atop the ship as it finally succumbs to its fate. The monster drops below the surface, and the whirlpool disappears. Millicent sits up slightly to see two crewmen swimming in the water. She thinks about waving to them to get them to approach her, but before she can act, the men are swept up and dragged under by a final tentacle attack from the creature. Then it descends to the ocean's depths. Millicent looks for other survivors and only sees Hathor floating on some wreckage about 20 meters away. Hathor sees his fellow survivors, and he uses his huge arms to paddle close to them, exclaiming, "Ves hail! Survivors! I thought I was the only one." Once close enough, Bennett helps his crewmate climb onto the cargo container. The ocean is now eerily silent. After a few calm moments, Millicent breaks the silence and says, "What should we do now?" They all look at each other. Then Millicent notices Bennett looking at something behind her. She turns, spots what he was looking at, and exclaims, "An island! We can move towards that island!" Hathor turns in the direction Millicent was looking and says, "That's not an island."